Inflation, right? It's the one economic topic that's everywhere, on the news, at work, at your dinner table. But here's the weird thing. The official numbers are telling one story, while your grocery bill seems to be screaming a completely different one. So what's really going on? All right, let's get into it and figure out this great inflation disconnect.
To really get where we are now, we have to remember where we've just been. And it wasn't that long ago, back in October 2022, that the Eurozone was staring down this number, a peak inflation rate of 10.6%. That was staggering, a historic high, and you felt it every single time you went to buy something.
Okay, now let's fast forward to today. That official rate, it has absolutely plummeted, all the way down to just 1.7%. I mean, that's a massive drop. It puts inflation right back in the target zone for the European Central Bank. So on paper, this looks like a huge win.
But this is where things get complicated. Because if the official data says inflation has been tamed, why do so many of us still feel like the cost of living is just out of control? This, right here, is the central puzzle we're going to solve today.
You know, this feeling actually has a name. It's called the perception gap, and it's a term that even the president of the ECB, Christine Lagarde, talks about. It's this major disconnect between the good news you see in the data and the, well, kind of bad feelings a lot of us have about our own finances.
So let's be super clear about this. The official data, it's correct. The rate at which prices are going up has slowed way, way down. But that feeling you have that everything is still painfully expensive, that's real too. And here's the key. Slowing inflation doesn't mean prices are falling. It just means they're not rising as ridiculously fast as they were before.
To really understand this gap, we have to step away from the economic charts for a minute and look at a different field entirely, psychology. Because it turns out our brains are kind of hardwired to experience inflation in a very specific and often pretty biased way.
Okay, so you've got two different things going on. There's measured inflation, that's the official number. It's calculated by tracking the price of this massive standardized basket of hundreds of goods and services. Then there's perceived inflation. That's your personal experience, your gut feeling based on the stuff you buy every single day. And well, they are often two very, very, very different things.
So why the huge gap? Well, the ECB points to a few fascinating reasons. First off, your personal shopping basket is totally unique. It doesn't look anything like the official one. We also have this powerful focus bias. We pay way more attention to things we buy all the time, like coffee and gas. Then there's loss aversion. Our brains literally feel the sting of a price increase much more intensely than we enjoy a rare price decrease. And finally, the constant media chatter just keeps inflation at the front of our minds, making us feel even more anxious about it.
And this chart, wow, it just proves that point about frequent purchases perfectly. Just look at it. Since the middle of 2022, food inflation has almost always been higher than the overall rate. And because we all buy food constantly, those higher prices completely dominate our perception of the economy, even if the price of, say, a new TV is stable or maybe even falling. And you should know, this isn't some new thing or something that only happens here. As President Lagarde herself says, this perception gap is a historical and global regularity. It's just a fundamental part of how we humans experience the economy.
Okay, so we get the perception problem. But how in the world did the official numbers come down so dramatically in the first place? Let's get into the story of how policymakers actually managed to tame that price beast.
This historic drop was no accident. Not at all. It was the direct result of what the ECB calls its decisive monetary policy response. So what does that mean in plain English? They took strong action, mainly by jacking up interest rates. That makes it more expensive for everyone to borrow money, which cools down spending across the whole economy and, eventually, gets prices under control.
And this timeline just lays it all out, right? It all started with that incredibly painful peak of 10.6% in October 2022. Then, over the next couple of years, the ECB's policies really started to bite. And by recent months, they had successfully steered inflation all the way back down to 1.7%, smack dab in that sweet spot around their 2% target.
So, mission accomplished. Case closed, right? Well, maybe not so fast. Now that inflation is back on target, a whole new debate is starting to bubble up about where we go from here. And guess what? The experts do not all agree on what the future holds.
The big question now is this a real return to normal, or is it just the calm before another storm? We're going to look at two very different forecasts, one from the European Central Bank itself, and another from the analysts over at BNP Paribas.
Now check out this table. For the coming year, you can see everyone is pretty much on the same page, predicting an average inflation rate of 1.9%. But now look at the year after that. The ECB thinks inflation will actually dip a little bit further, to 1.8%. BNP Paribas, though, they see it bouncing right back up to 2.3%, and that's well above that 2% target.
So here's the core of the disagreement. The ECB basically believes we're heading back to a nice, stable, low-inflation world. But BNP Paribas is predicting what they're calling a reflation phase, where the economy gets stronger and actually pushes inflation back up and keeps it there.
And why do they think that? Well, BNP Paribas argues that we might be entering a totally new, maybe more chaotic era for the global economy. They're talking more frequent supply chain shocks, sudden shortages, unpredictable disruptions from climate change, all creating a world with more volatile and, on average, higher inflation.
All right, we have covered a lot of ground here, from psychology to policy to peering into the future. So let's bring it all home and figure out what all this means for you and your wallet going forward.
If you remember just 3 things, make it these. Number 1, officially, the war against high inflation has been a success. The numbers are clear. Number 2, if your wallet is still hurting, you're not going crazy. Your perception is shaped by powerful and totally valid psychological forces. And number 3, the future is really uncertain. That stable, predictable world of prices we all got used to, it might not be coming back.
And this quote from that BNP Paribas report just sums up that third point perfectly. They're basically saying the world is fundamentally changed, and our expectations about inflation need to change right along with it. The whole idea of a long, quiet period of low, stable prices might just be a thing of the past. Which leaves us with this one big final question to think about. Have we actually turned a page in economic history? Is this new era of price volatility and uncertainty the new normal? Honestly, only time will tell. But it is the defining economic question we're all going to be living through.